All-State Sugar Bowl between Washington and Texas, the second semifinal. Texas is a 4-point favorite, total 63.5-ish. Monday, January 1st, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, ESPN at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. Interestingly enough, these two teams met in the Alamo Bowl last year, and Washington won as I think around a field goal, 4-point underdog, 27-20. I took a lot from that game. So when they met last year, Texas, who runs a lot of quarters coverage, as much as some of I think they're top 5 or 10 among Power 5 teams in quarters rate. So which means too deep, you have all 4 covered. It's harder to get explosive plays when you play a lot of quarters. That's at least the goal. That's what they did last year. They said, we're not going to give you explosive plays to Penix and Washington. And Penix went 1 of 10 on throws 20-plus yards downfield, where Washington killed them because they had, close to 450 yards of offense, was running the ball and short passes. I think he was 11-11 on screens. I think like 12 of 15 for 148 yards on short passes. So that's how they killed Texas. So what's the difference this year? I think that they're going to have the same scheme. They're going to have the same game plan. We're not going to, because I don't think that they trust their corners to man up with, especially with now a healthy McMillan. But you have McMillan, Polk, and Odunze, 3 NFL caliber receivers on the outside. And that's Texas's weak point, is their coverage at the cornerback position. So I think that they're going to play a lot of quarters, a lot of 2 deep safeties, and they're going to say, you're not going to get the explosive play. The difference with this Texas defense is that you can't run on them. Last year it was okay run D, but this year it's elite. No one can run on them. You just can't do it. Their defensive line was Sweat, Sorrell, Murphy, Burke, even linebacker Ford, their slot, Barron, their cornerbacks are really good in run defense. Watson, Brooks, all good tacklers. So this matchup with a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line is going to be a fascinating one, but you just can't run on Texas. And they're going to be able to play their safeties deep and stop the run. So then it comes down to Penix and the short passing attack, which, hitting crossers, things of that nature. And I think that they'll be able to move the ball. So their wide receivers are too talented. But what I think will happen is, one, this is going to happen to both teams, by the way. In the red zone, Washington, the field shrinks. Middle of the field is easier, and that's where Penix loves to throw it. Middle of the field is easier to defend. And I think Texas's defense is going to step up in the red zone. And by the way, Texas's offense, which I'll get to in a second, because of the loss of Jonathan Brooks, and it's not a great run blocking offensive line, and they love to hit explosives. Their offense isn't that great in the red zone. So I think, and the Washington plays a 4-2-5, bend don't break. I think there's going to be a lot of stops in the red zone here, which are conducive to an under. I flipped. I thought I was going to like the over. I like the under here. So I'll go through it. But I think what's going to happen is Washington's going to move the ball, but Texas is going to be able to generate pressure on, up the middle specifically, and that's what throws off Penix in this offense. Also, their offense works best with play action. Every single one of Penix's interceptions this year, all 9 of them, came without play action. And if the run game isn't working, which I don't think it will, play action won't be as effective. But I think Washington will move the ball. Texas is going to have to play a little softer, but they're going to have opportunities to get sacks, negative plays, and stop drives. And then when Washington does get in the red zone, they're going to get some stops. Other side, when Texas has the ball, great pass blocking offensive line, not a great run blocking offensive line, and they're missing Brooks, and the run punch just isn't there. We also don't know if Xavier Worthy's fully healthy, which would be huge. So I think Texas will be able to move the ball some. Both teams are going to be able to move the ball. There's a reason this total is high, but I think they're going to struggle some in the red zone. I think this Washington defense is underrated ultimately. A lot of it, we saw it against Oregon. Their season-long metrics were impacted by injuries. Some of their best players, Cam Fab, their safety, Tooley, their best defensive tackle, Asa Turner, one of their best defensive backs. They were all hurt for long stretches. They really came on the end of the year. They made some schematic tweaks. They started to play really well. It was their offense that kind of started to struggle. And then there's this wild card, Zach Durfee, who Washington won't stop talking about. This guy who just became eligible. He was screwed by the NCAA. Apparently he's been ripping up practice. He can provide some. Apparently, he's going to have like 2 or 3 sacks from the message boards that I'm reading. But he can help with the edge rush. So, look, game's not going to be played at a fast pace. Both defenses can hold up in the red zone, where Texas's offense has struggled and Washington's O can be contained. And yeah, I think that there's going to be a focus on taking away the explosive play, stops in the red zone, a couple negative plays to end drives, slow pace. I think this total is too high. Scary, but I like the under.
Yeah, 62 being key. I see it going down to that. So if you want to grab it, I would grab that. I agree with Stuck because mostly because when you're betting on the Texas offense, it's a complete crapshoot. You're staying at the roulette wheel with finishing drives when it comes to Texas. Now they're missing part of their run game. I mean, boy,
and if Worthy's not 100%, that's huge.
Yeah, you never know. Now, I went back to that Alamo Bowl game too, but really just for one specific reason, because this is a big battle between the Washington offensive line. They won the Joe Moore Award. They're going up against, I don't know, the best run stuffing defensive front seven in all of college football. Good, good and cumulative pressures. They were 6th. So this is good on good. Texas was 11th in pass rush per PFF. So when you go back into that box score from last year when they saw each other, where Pete Kwiatkowski got his chance to rattle Michael Penix, there were 55 true passing attempts by Michael Penix. There was only 5 pressures. And I mean, that included Sweat and a couple of the other names that you're seeing in that defensive front seven right now. 5 pressures and 55 true passing attempts, no quarterback, 1 quarterback hit, 4 quarterback hurries. They just didn't have an effect on Penix whatsoever. Now, it's a year later. I get it. But I just wanted to see how much did they rattle Penix last year, and they didn't at all. So the question is, can Penix pick apart this Texas secondary? And you're right. I don't see Washington's not going to line up and just run the ball with Dylan Johnson, right? They obviously need to have some semblance of a run game so that they can get the play action, because everything is predicated on their play action. But if you go and look and see what they did to Oregon, they split out into 5 wides. I mean, they were throwing Dylan Johnson out in the slot. They spread it out. They really stretched the field. Looked something more like a Tennessee offense than it did anything else. So we'll see what Caleb DeBoer comes up with, but usually it's all predicated off the play action pass. Now you're going to get a nickel defense from Texas. They're going to change between 3 and 4 man fronts. They have a moderate blitz at 33%. They're pretty average in creating pressure. Coverage wise, you're right. It's all quarters. They had a high success rate. Sometimes they use cover 3 and 1, mostly quarters. I think also amazing is what Penix does with blitz. His pressure to sack ratio is 3.2%. Compare that to Jalen Milroe, who's like 30% pressure to sack ratio. Like, you can't get to Penix. He is NFL ready. That arm of his just does wonders. He's going to get rid of the ball before the blitz can get home. Penix has dominated cover 3 in quarters, at least a 60% success rate, one of the highest rates of EPA. And he creates a big play on 32% of attempts against quarters. So there is an avenue here. I think Washington is just going to toy with this secondary. Roma Duns, Jalen McMillan, Polk, they're all explosive. You go into the routes, hitch. Texas has a 37% success rate against hitch. That's really bad. Texas has a 37% success rate against wide receiver screen. That's really bad. And then out routes. Texas bumps it up to 50%. That's average. But for what Washington runs with those 3 wide receivers I named, Texas has not been good at defending those passing routes whatsoever. Go to the other side of the ball. What's the best place to attack the Washington defense? Is it through the rush, or where is it at? And I really had to examine that Oregon box score, because where did this defense come from? Oregon was stuffed 30% of their rush attempts, which is national average. But Oregon averaged 6.2 yards per carry, and they generated just 1 explosive run. So how are you able to generate 6.2 yards per carry, not get that many points, and you only had 1 explosive? Oregon averaged 5.4 average distance to go in third downs, and they only went 3 of 10 in third downs. Why? The defense of Washington absolutely swarmed. There were 11 hats round the football on first contact.
Plus, your safeties are healthy now. And people forget, Washington isn't Texas or Alabama in that their depth isn't as good. So the depth, like your backup safeties, it's a bigger drop off at Washington because it's just the recruiting hasn't all the way got there yet. So when their defenders were hurt this year, the drop off was significant. Well, they had cluster injuries at safety.
Yeah, and now they're all completely healthy. And if that defense swarms like it did against Oregon, I mean, that Texas rushing attack, it's going to have some problems. Quinn Ewers should have Xavier Worthy. He's got AD Mitchell. He's going to get some man coverage here. Washington runs 25% man coverage. Texas was horrible against man coverage, a 41% success rate. When Washington does go zone, it's generally quarters or cover three. Quinn Ewers had a ton of success against that. So we'll see what the decision is here to pivot between that for Chuck Morrell. Now, if you just want to go straight advantages in this game, special teams advantage, that belongs to Texas. Tackle grading, that belongs to Texas. Explosives, believe it or not, that actually belongs to the Texas passing per EPA. Middle eight, that's Washington. Kalen DeBoer has definitely got the upper hand here as far as in-game management coaching. So there's a clear path for me to see Washington winning this game through the air, fast track of the Superdome, the defense with their safeties crowding the line of scrimmage on rushing attempts. I think they're going to be okay in coverage against Quinn Ewers. And like I said before, Texas is an absolute crapshoot in scoring opportunities when they get drives past the 40-yard line. It was good, and it cashed our Big 12 championship at the end of the season. I'm not sure they get it done here. I think Washington covers. This game is not closing at 4. This game is closing at 3 or 2.5. I'm going to put it in the app. Now, I don't have my Washington 100-1 in the app. I will take Washington +4. I think they win outright and they go to the national title game against Michigan.
Now, what do you think about? I mean, the other thing here is you have Sark with time to prepare. What's he going to cook up? And then, but DeBoer is arguably maybe in 2 or 3 years he's considered the best coach in college football, depending on who retires. And all that guy does is cover. All he does is succeed as an underdog. Do you think this is an edge for Washington with the time to prepare with DeBoer?
Absolutely. I mean, DeBoer, I'll have to look it up. It's on Wikipedia. He's like 111 as a head coach. He doesn't lose games at all. He covers like an animal. Last year, I think what they cover almost every game last year. But when you look
even if you go back to when he was a coordinator, like this cover rate is crazy.
And when you look at things like middle eight, that tells you really who's in tune with the clock and how to manage the game. I mean, DeBoer is one of the best. I mean, he's better than Sark. We're looking at 23rd for Washington, 45th for Sark, and Sark is generally a pretty good game manager. I mean, there's no shortage of love between me and Sark, but DeBoer is just a better in-game coach here.
I'm going to disagree on your. I don't mind taking Washington once. I'm going to my call is I'm going to say Texas 30, Washington 27.
Well, 4 will cover, but my 100-1 that I got from the Westgate, I'll have to cry in it, wipe away my tears.
You're gonna have a shot. I think this game's good. I think both games are gonna be really good, and really close, and that'll make up for a lot of these bowl blowouts we're seeing with all the opt-outs.